Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. I am joined by Chris Guillebeau in today's episode, and I just want to say what a fan I am of his work. He is a fantastic author and blogger, and I've been reading his stuff for many years now. And it was an utter joy when he responded to my random email saying, "Do you think you'd like to come on my podcast?" And he actually said yes. So this episode is recorded with Chris while he is on his book tour in America, and we're talking mainly about his new book, Time Anxiety. Time Anxiety is about the illusion of urgency and a better way to live. So if you feel stuck in the urgent box and if you're struggling with the way you see time, then it's so worth a listen. I hope you enjoy it. Hello, Chris. How are you? Thank you so much for being with me
I'm
today.
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for asking me.
So where are you today, Chris? You're on the road at the moment, aren't you? So where are you right now?
hmm Yeah, I'm doing book tour through a number of U.S. and Canadian cities. So at the moment, I am in Austin, Texas.
And when are you going to come to the UK? That's my next question.
Oh, I would love to come to the UK. I haven't been in a while. I usually go once a year,
Mm.
but I don't currently have a date set. So hopefully sometime
Yeah,
soon.
please come because there's a lot of us who would
Mm,
love to see you in
mm.
person. So I am talking to Chris Guillebeau, and that's the correct way to say your name, isn't it, Chris? Is that correct?
It's perfect. Yep.
Because you may see it written down and think, "Oh, this is an interesting surname, and how do I say this? And am I doing it correctly?" And I have read a lot of your work. I've gifted your books to
Mm,
people. I've read your books.
mm.
I first read your Brief Guide to World Domination a long time ago, and I was
Wow, that's a
yeah,
very long time
I
ago.
know, and I was
Mm,
inspired, and I was all in. And I have an aspiring writer nephew called Jonah, and he loves your work, and he's been reading it all. And you're very much like him in lots of ways. So thank you for
mm,
giving us Brits your time today. And I wanted to talk to you especially around your latest book, even though there are loads of books on the shelf that people can find. But I thought it would be amazing to talk about. I've got it right here. Hold on, I'm just going
mm,
to hold it up. It will be
mm,
backwards, but it says Time Anxiety, the
mhm,
illusion of urgency and a better way to live. And I finished this a couple of days ago and really enjoyed reading it. And I'm going to share some of my reflections as we go through. But why don't you start by
mm,
just telling us a little bit about how come this book came about? You've talked about time in lots of
mhm.
different, things I've read over the years. What got you to the moment that sparked this book?
Well, I came to this book partly through my own struggle
Mm,
and my own just trying to like find a way to manage, the different things in my life. And there's so many things that I wanted to do, and I also had this kind of sense of regret or despair of like, oh, maybe I've missed my chance at something, or time is running out. And I just started like diving into this more, and I talked with people, and I realized like a lot of people feel a lot of distress around time,
mm,
and they do feel like it's too late for something in life, or they just feel like, how do I kind of triage, my day to day? And there's various like productivity systems and tools and methods for doing so, and I think that a lot of those things actually stress people out more than help them. And so that's kind of how I came to it. And as I talked more and more with people, I understood that this is a very universal
mm,
problem. And just about everybody that I spoke with, they're like, I've never heard this phrase before, time anxiety,
mm.
but I have that. Like whatever that is me. And so it feels very personal to a lot of people. And so spent the past 2 years researching and writing on it.
Yeah, and it was so good to read because it did create quite a few of my own reactions. I kind of put it in the same category as another book that had a big influence on me, which was 4,000 Weeks by Oliver
hmm
Berkman. And it's the same
hmm
kind of idea around very differently written. Yours is so practical and chunked up, but that concept of we are struggling with the concept of time and we need to
hmm
talk about it differently. And I think I read that for the first time a few years ago, and reading your book just made me have a similar kind of experience of just, oh, I'm struggling with
hmm
this. This is a problem for me. And what's interesting is you're somebody who has, on many measures, people could say there's so many things that you've achieved. Apart from the fact you visited every country in the world, there's lots of other things that you've done, and yet. The thing with time anxiety is that it doesn't get resolved by ticking things off your hopes and dreams list, does it? That's not going to work. You might think that would
hmm
sort of abate it, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it's tricky because It's okay to be goal
Mm,
oriented, and I still kind of, I still am very like future
mm,
minded, and I have lists, and I like to do all those things. But as you said, it doesn't actually resolve the problem. In fact, the better you get at doing things, like if you're like, I want to get
mm,
better at managing projects, or like, just having a lot of different goals and ambitions and such, the better you get at it, the more things there are. Just like the better you get at communication, like emails or something, like the more emails you send, well, the more that are going to come back. So it only just increases whatever sense of angst or anxiety or twitchiness that you feel. And so it's interesting because a lot of people feel overwhelmed in different
mm.
ways, and the way they try to solve that problem is ironically by adding something to it. Like they feel like they have too much, and they're like, so there must be something else. I need a new system or tool, or here's like a new method of journaling, or
Mm.
keeping track of things. And so obviously more is not the answer to too much, but that is like our natural kind of intuition. So yeah, we need a different way of thinking about time, as you said.
Yeah, and do you think obviously time anxiety has always been around. People have always had the
Mhm.
existential time anxiety, but do you
Mhm.
think that the problem of time anxiety has actually got worse?
I do. I think for a couple of reasons. One, because of how communication works in the world these days, and social media is just endless, and there's always some conversation about of something happening, and a conversation about the conversation, and the news cycle is endless.
Mm,
And so, technology is good in many ways. I'm not anti-technology at all, but I do think it's contributed to kind of a distorted sense of time. And also the post-pandemic environment, I think something did shift for a lot of people in the pandemic, of just in terms of remote work, but also expectations around working in communication and such. I talked with some people who said that their schedule is actually seems more flexible than it ever did before, but yet they feel like they have less time, and they're trying to figure out why is that. Like, I used to
so
be
true.
very tightly scheduled, and now I'm less scheduled, but I'm getting less done. I don't understand, that paradox. And I think there's a few reasons for that, but I definitely think that things have shifted, and time is time. As you said, time doesn't change, but our perception of time does change, and our perception of time has become one in which we feel it is more limited and compressed and constrained.
And I definitely think what you've just said is true. I have had my own business now for just coming up to 10 years. And before that, I worked in
Mm,
education. I was an assistant head.
mm,
And I was reflecting actually this morning. I was thinking as I was having a shower and thought, did I feel like this about time when I was an assistant
mhm,
head, even though I had such a busy job? Like a school day, when you're
mhm,
working in UK education, it would be very normal for me to not even have time to go to the toilet for 12, 40,
mhm.
12 hours.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and so it wasn't about busyness, but something around the
Mhm,
stress I'm feeling around my daily
mhm,
life. Not that
mhm,
I'm massively stressed, but this anxiety around time, I think is just a better way of putting
mhm,
it, I do think has creeped. I'd love you to unpack for everyone the difference between the 2 types of time anxiety. You talk about
mhm.
existential, which is something I help people with quite a lot and try to demystify
Yeah,
that and make it really normal.
that's great.
And
Mhm,
then there's the daily routine part. And if I can just say,
mhm,
as I was listening to some of the things, reading some of the things in the book, I
mhm,
realized that I'm getting to a point with my daily routine anxiety that I'm
mhm,
struggling to enjoy anything because I'm constantly
mhm,
thinking about the time it's taking to do it. So even if I'm out walking the
mhm,
dog, I'm thinking, I've got to squeeze this into it, mustn't take any longer, and I've got to get back, I've got to do
mhm,
this. Even the things I want to be doing, there's this rush inside me, is the only way I can describe it.
mhm,
So would you do a better job than me of
mhm.
explaining those two
Oh,
different
I don't
types?
know if I can do a better job. I think you set it up very well, and you do such wonderful work in helping people think more about purpose, and not just think about it, but to apply that meaningfully to their lives. So maybe this is a good interjection to say I was very happy to read your
Thank
manuscript. I'm
you.
excited about your book coming
Thank
out.
you.
I think it's going to be very, very helpful to people. But maybe an easy way to think about the two types is too late versus too much. So like too
Mm,
late is existential,
yeah,
like
good.
I'm too late for something in my life. Maybe I have some regret over a choice I made or didn't make at some point. What should I do with my life? And time is slipping away. And then the day to day, or the daily, the routine is like there's just too much going on, and I'm walking the dog and I'm thinking about other things, and when I'm doing the other things I'm thinking about still other things, and nothing is ever done. There's no sense of completion. Even if I accomplish something, there's always something else that remains. So it is endless. And how do we choose? And people say, well, just prioritize, but that's like, how do I prioritize? What if I have more priorities than I have time?
Mm.
And also, whose priorities? Am I choosing my boss's priorities, my partner's priorities, the priorities that I feel, a sense of expectation, or like, this is what I should be doing, quote unquote, or do I choose like the priorities of my heart,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word? Like, what is it so it's very nebulous. And so, we're using the word anxiety, but sometimes I think angst is almost a better word, because
Mm.
it's low grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just always kind of there, and like, you can still enjoy life and you can have a good life and you can be like, well, I'm very grateful for all these different things,
Mm.
but yet I'm also kind of like worried.
Mm.
And so, people tend to like gravitate more toward one or the other. If you talk to them, like, what is time anxiety like for you? And like, um, I've been doing this thing on book tour where I give everyone like a little post-it and I ask them to write, what is your biggest worry about time? And it can be big or small. It can be funny. It can be serious. And don't put your name on it. Like, we're going to read some of these out, but it'll be totally
Mm.
anonymous. And so I collect them at the end of the night and I read some, and it's just like a huge range of things. But ultimately, these two parts or two types are interconnected. And I think you write about this, in your own way as well, because obviously, like, we want what we do in our day to have some connection to, our long-term purpose or meaning, or
Mm.
however we like to think of that. But it's hard, it's challenging, because there's so much in our life and in our greater environment.
There is. And I think sometimes that whole existential greater meaning thing becomes, again, nebulous, this idea of I will feel like I'm there one day. And I guess what I'm trying to do, and
Mm.
your book is deeply practical as well, is we just take steps towards trying to figure out more of the things that we should be doing and just gravitate towards them when we can. And yet, like you say, there is too much often that is
Mhm.
coming in our way, especially in the squeeze years, which is when a lot of people come to me when they're squeezed between. I mean, I'm kind of there.
Mhm.
So, Chris, my mum is quite
Mhm.
poorly, so
Mhm.
we've got one end where I'm dealing with a. Actually, I'm giving her a lot of. Sort of my brain and emotions and time, and I have three
Mhm.
children who are growing up now, but they're still, they still need a lot of that.
Mhm.
So there's a squeeze there, let alone the work squeeze. But one of the things I noticed as I was reading the book is I realized that on any given day, when things take longer than I think they're going to, or something happens that
Mhm.
I didn't expect it to, it's too big a deal. I don't mean as in
Mhm.
I don't mean that anybody else would notice, but I'm living with this low grade anxiety that
Mhm.
I didn't expect that to happen today. I thought today would look like this. I thought today I might have a little bit of a rest time. And I then
Mhm.
prioritize the wrong things, which you talk about in the book, and we get the stuff done first. You talk about pay yourself first. Talk about that with me a
Mhm.
little bit. I know I've jumped on here, but let's just talk about that. I loved that. I've heard that concept, obviously, to do with business, but you talk about, I don't
Mhm.
do this with time very often.
Uh-huh.
And I felt really challenged by my husband is always saying, do that first and then do the
Right.
chores. But I find it difficult. And a lot
Mhm.
of women, I think, will
Sure.
find
Of
this
course.
hard. I
Absolutely.
find it difficult to
Mhm.
come down in the morning. So my husband in the morning will
Mhm.
come down, he'll sit down, he'll have his coffee, he'll read a book,
Mhm.
whatever he's going to do in
Mhm.
quiet time. And I come down and I think I should do this, 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 and this, and this. And I'll do that. And then I will sit down
Mhm.
with my cup of
Mhm.
tea and I'll do the same.
Mhm.
But the problem is, of course, that moment doesn't come.
Mhm.
So can you talk into that
I
a
see.
bit? Because there are a lot of people who will be going, yes, that's
Mhm.
exactly what I do. And I hope I'll do it later, but I don't.
Mhm.
Talk
Right. No, that's great. That's great. And there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe a couple of like disclaimers. I mean, it is of course true that burdens fall unfairly, in society, and women do, have feel like they have this experience of like, oh, there's more that I need to do and more I need to look at after, perhaps, than my partner, or if you don't have a partner. The other thing I thought of is like, it's okay to be aware of your like your preferences and your cognitive ability. And I actually like to jump straight in the morning into like work things too, because that's when I do my best
Mm,
work, and I know that. And so I like look forward to that time. So it's not so much like pay yourself first. I have to like pursue my leisure activities or my hobbies or things, at the top of the morning. It's more of a, as I'm thinking about life, like we all have things we have to do and things that we want to do. And like there's a constant, flux of that. And what tends to happen, as you said, is like we're giving like this short shrift to all those things that we do find enjoyable and meaningful without having anything to do with work, or sometimes even to do with our responsibilities to others. And so the idea is more like, how can I flip this so that I'm actually I do find a way,
mm,
to do some of those things. So I give some examples in the book about, can you take an afternoon, start with an afternoon and do something that you wouldn't normally do, you know, go to a movie theater, or even like these days we're mostly watching like movies and TVs, at home. But like, what if you like went to a movie theater during the afternoon? And like for a lot of people, that's a very strange thing. It's like, that's my work time, or that's the work. Like I would do that in the evening or the weekend, maybe, or something. Um, and maybe it's something completely different, but it's more a model of, pay yourself first comes from a personal finance concept
mm.
of like, oh, I'm like, for a lot of business owners, they're actually in debt because they're paying all these bills and things. And so the idea is like, how can you make sure your own needs are covered? So what can you do about that in life? Because there's all these cliches about time. Time is our most precious resource and such, which is true,
Mm.
but we don't always live that way. So I'm just trying to
No.
find different ways of helping people do that.
And it's such a good thing to talk about. And it's important for me to own that the things that I said about the way I behave is
Mhm.
self-inflicted at times. I'm not
Sure.
suggesting that I would don't want to put the blame
Mhm.
on anybody else who's not pulling their weight or doing it. I will just sometimes think,
Mhm.
until I've done this, I'm not allowed to do that. It's almost like, which is
Mhm.
another thing you talk about, which
Oh,
are
yes.
rules that we live by.
Mhm.
And I've been
Right.
reflecting on rules, and I think I grew up in a home where my dad had his own business, but he had
Mhm.
grown up with, they really grew up with nothing. My dad actually lived in
Mhm.
in poverty, really, growing up, and there was something in that drive that my dad had, which was very much around, I must not waste time, I must not waste opportunity.
Mhm.
And my dad is very much like do it now kind of person, and so I think there's a bit of my own personality which is a bit urgent, but also
Mhm.
this idea there is always so much to do and I mustn't waste my time is a bit of a
Mhm.
narrative that I am
Yes, very
allowing
much.
to lead my
Mhm.
life in a way that I don't want
Mm.
it to. And I have to own
Yep.
that, because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if I had
Right.
multi-millions of pounds, I could still behave like that with
Mhm.
everybody doing
Mhm.
every chore for me and everything that had to be done. That's about me and my
Mhm.
choices. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes women have got to recognize, where am I not allowing myself to have help? Where am I not allowing myself to
Mhm.
do the right thing? And to not just say, this is because nobody will help, but also, where are these rules
Mhm.
for men, women, anybody that I'm living
Yep.
by? And you talk about this concept of rules. What were
Mhm.
some of the rules that you thought you might have when you were thinking about time?
Mhm. Yeah, well, again, nothing wrong with being a hard worker.
No.
I think that's great. Like that's great. The challenge is like you internalized this rule of you took the rule of like I am a hard worker. That's like an identity. That's a healthy thing, a strong thing to hold on to. But it kind of morphed into like I must not waste any moment, or every minute, or at least every hour of my day must be accounted for productively.
Yes.
And so it sounds like that is a rule that's not serving you, right?
Mm.
Or there are times at least that it doesn't serve you. And I think there are different seasons in life. And sometimes it's like, oh, there's something I'm really excited about. I am going to kind of go all in with this thing. But then that's not really sustainable, like for years and years. So it sounds like, okay, you got these rules that have become internalized, based on your growing up and such. What might be something that serves me better? And so in my case, I think a lot of it came to like responsiveness. I think for a while, like I kind of equated responsiveness with excellence,
Mm.
or like being a good human. If I am responding quickly to like, all the communication that comes my way, then I am a good person. And if not, I am a failure. And, it's easy from the outside to see like the fallacy in that belief and see, oh, that's problematic. And like, what if communication scales? Like to a certain point, you're not going to, like, if that's all you're doing is responding, don't you want to be creating something or initiating or like making something? But it took me some time to kind of unpack that and just to kind of rewrite it and say, well, I'm going to, try to communicate well with like a smaller group of people, and I'll do my best with the other things, but I'm actually not going to be able to be responsive to like everything that comes my way, and that's something I have to accept.
Yeah, that's good. And learning to accept some of our limitations is so important. I think as I was again reflecting myself on this, and as I'm thinking about some of the people I talk to and work with, it's also about recognizing, knowing these rules exist or the ways we think, but also then I always talk about what are the small tweaks we can make. And I
Hmm.
realized another silly rule I had is, even though I have my own business now, I almost had this rule that I really should have started by 9 a.m. It doesn't matter how late I've worked. It doesn't
Sure,
matter if
sure,
I've done
sure.
a day. Yesterday I had
Right.
a very, very long day. And therefore,
Hmm.
why I don't think there can be some, ebb and flow. So this
Hmm.
year, I've worked quite hard on that.
Hmm.
And I have made some changes, which mean that there are certain things that are happening every day. And that understanding of that time rule that I was living under actually
Hmm.
helped me go, right, I'm going to make a change here. How can I allow
Hmm.
myself some grace to move through my week in slightly different patterns, depending on how one day looks to the next? And I'm really
Hmm.
proud of that progress. And again,
That's
if
great.
you
Well done.
thanks. And
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, it
Mm.
is about progress. It's not about going, right, I'm never going to
Mm.
overwork, or I'm never going to um, feel anxious about time. But it's, what does a bit of progress look like in your everyday
Mm.
life, that over time they really do start to make a difference, don't they? Those
Mhm.
tweaks
Mhm.
that we make.
For sure. I think what maybe what you've come to is like this understanding that if we don't place constraints or limits on our work and various time commitments, nobody else is going to. Like, even if you're like, you've
Yeah.
been working for yourself for 10 years, but even if somebody's in a company or an organization, most of us these days are not working in factories. We don't have like a quota of manufacturing. The work is never done.
No.
Like, if you are and the thing is, like, if you are an effective, efficient worker, then you actually are just doing more than everybody else, because you finish one thing, you go on to something else, and it can be very helpful to have a sense of completion and to say, okay, this is enough for me. And, this week, this is what I need to do for this project. This is what I need to do for this cycle, or, however you measure it. And once I finish those things, then I'm going to just kind of pause and acknowledge that. And maybe I'll do something else. Maybe it will be a work task. Maybe it'll be something different, or maybe I will still feel energized enough that I'm like, okay, I do want to like move on to the next part of this. But I guess, if you don't create those constraints for yourself, nobody else is going to.
No, I actually talked about that the other day with a group. I do
Mm.
quite a lot of work with the NHS in the UK, and a lot of medics, a lot
Mhm.
of nurses.
Yeah,
And
that's fair.
yeah, they won't have the freedom of time that somebody might have if they're working at home with a
Mhm.
laptop, or in
Right.
that kind of space. But there is a reality that unless you decide how you're going to, unless you protect yourself or think about how you're going to do
Mhm.
this, nobody's going to do it for you. And
Mhm.
that is true in every environment. Nobody's going to say,
Mhm.
stop, you're caring too much, or you're that just
Right.
doesn't happen very often.
Uh-huh.
And I think this realization that the system around us, the water we're swimming in, will just take, sadly, from
Mhm.
us. And what can
Sure.
we do to put those things in place that say, actually, I want to do this for the long haul. I do want to give. I do want to serve. I do want to do something that really matters. But if I'm going to do this well, I've got to understand what's like a tyranny, and what's good for me.
Mhm.
In fact, there's a story in the book of somebody who had given so much without boundary that she ended up walking out one day. She was a palliative care nurse, and
Mhm.
walking out one day and not
Mhm.
going back for a long time.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and that is that idea of it's just got too much. And how do people
Mhm.
use books like things like time anxiety? They can help people stay in the safe zone. That's how I describe it. How do I
Mhm.
use these
That's a great way to put it.
practical
Yeah.
tools to stay in that safe
Mhm.
zone? So what do you think about people who are in more rigid positions than me and you? So my children are
Mhm.
older, and also you and I do have some level of time flex. I mean, my clients dictate when
Mhm.
I'm going to be with them, but I do have flex
Mhm.
around that. What about somebody who might be listening to this and says, okay, it's all right for you, it's all right for Chris,
Mhm. Sure. Sure,
you have
sure.
that space, but I have to go into, I work in a school and I have to be there 8
Mhm.
till 4:30 or
Yep.
whatever it is.
Mhm.
What would your recommendations for them so that
Mhm.
they don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, to use the I
Right,
don't know whether
right,
that's
of
a
course.
British phrase or
No, I think that's we have that one too.
okay, fine, good.
Uh, so, yeah, a few things, and I think the story of the palliative care nurse who like walked out. There's so many stories like that, right? There's so many
Absolutely.
people who get fed up, and and they often come from people who are carers. They're people who are giving so much of themselves
Mm,
in a role like that, and they're drawn to that because they are motivated, through service, and they want to give of themselves, but they, ultimately give too much. And so I think part of it is like thinking about, if I want to do this for a long time, what does that look like for me? Not just for today. Um, I think not everything in life has to be done with excellence. And you can do your job with excellence, but there's so many parts of your job. I do wonder, like, what parts of your job, can you give less than full cognitive attention to? How can you identify like what needs my full engagement and what does not? And as for people, who are at a company or something, I think we all have some degree of autonomy, and so we all have some degree of autonomy and we have some degree of limitations. So, whether you are like freelancing or at the company or organization or completely on your own, whatever that sphere of influence looks like, that is your zone to work with, or to work in. And if you feel like, I guess there's two directions. Like, one, I think most people, once they start to look at that, they're like, oh, there are some changes I can make, and maybe you probably
mm,
explain this well in your work, like what are the tweaks I can make and such. If you really feel like after you kind of audit this and you're like, actually, I really have very little autonomy, then I almost think maybe there is a bigger change that you do need to make. I don't know if you
mm,
need to walk out of your job tomorrow, but if you are feeling so constrained that so much of your time is occupied not just with a schedule, but with like, here is exactly what you need to do during that time. I think that's difficult.
mm.
I think that's difficult to like manage for a career, or maybe you do it for one career, but then you have another career at a certain point. I don't know. I don't know what you think. To me, that seems hard to sustain for a lifetime.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think for some people it is about what does this look like for a period of time, or how do I build my
Mhm.
week? Quite a few people I work with, they don't do clinical facing work all week; they're doing
Mhm.
something else with the time,
Right.
and that is a really good solution for long haul.
Mhm.
Being able to say, actually, now I do, I don't know, 3 days of clinical facing work, and the other
Mhm.
work I do is more consultative, and that means people get to continue to do the thing that brings them a great deal of passion and meaning without just feeling they've given up on that. But there is also, as you say, sometimes it's right to say I've done this for a season and it's
Mhm.
okay that I'm now wanting to do something else. I go to great pains to tell people I didn't leave teaching because I hate teaching. It was just time. It
Right.
was just
Sure.
time. I would
Yeah.
still advocate for going to be a teacher. It's
Mhm.
one of the best, most wonderful jobs in the world. It's
Mhm.
hard,
Yep.
but it's wonderful. And I didn't leave because I'd
Mhm.
fell out of love with it or that I couldn't hack it. It was
Mhm.
just time, and that's okay. And I think
It's great that you did that too, because think about how many teachers stay too
that's
long,
right. Yeah, because they
right? I
feel
mean,
they
and we
should.
all
"Oh, you're quitting."
right.
You're
And we all know we all know people in these fields who, like, they got into it for the right
mm.
reasons, and maybe they were a good teacher, but then they just didn't leave, and so then they're actually not a great teacher.
Exactly, and they wish
So
they weren't
mhm.
there, and then they
Right,
exactly.
right.
And you talk about actually in the book, don't you, quitting and finishing,
Mhm,
not finishing things. And I recently
mhm,
read Annie Duke's book, How to Decide, and she talks in
mhm.
there about
Right.
quitting. And
Mhm,
so the two books I've just most recently read are about this idea of
mhm,
She says quitters um, winners never quit and quitters never win, and how that's wrong, that's not true,
mhm.
that
Completely,
we
completely
do need
wrong.
to just quit and say, actually, I don't want to
Mhm.
do this anymore. I've had enough of this. Somebody's trying to call me. I'm just putting the phone down.
That's
Sorry,
fun.
we don't need to edit that out. But you talk about that as well, letting things go, or thinking, don't read the book if you don't
Mhm,
want to, and
mhm,
maybe you can have loved doing a certain job, but it's just time to say, actually, it's a new
mhm,
season for me. It's a new season for me to
mhm,
go and explore something else. And any of those thoughts I had that I should do this for 40, 50 years, who says?
mhm.
Who
Yeah.
decided that?
It's people have a hard time with it though. A lot of people really struggle with when they hear these ideas about I should quit something or not everything has to be done with excellence. It really goes against,
Yes.
what they have been taught or trained or just what they internalized, as a child or a young adult. But it can really be freeing. Like I always like to push on it a little bit because it's like, oh, if you believe everything has to be done with excellence, I think that's impossible. I think there are like you're not going to be able to do everything just incredibly well. And if you are actually trying, then you're probably spreading yourself too thin, and you have this like zone of genius in your life that could really come alive if
If you
you
let it,
let some
yeah, let
things
some
go.
things go.
Yeah.
I'm glad to say
Mhm.
that's one problem I don't have in my many list of problems. I'm quite good at doing things
Sure. Yeah,
half-assed.
sure, sure.
You talk about you.
That's right.
I can do that. I can let it go. I'll be like, "Ship it, let it go, do the thing."
Good. That's
I
good.
I
That's
yeah,
helpful. I feel like successful people have that ability.
one thing that I have got under control is not everything has to be brilliant, and some things are, and other
Mm,
things are not. And I really encourage people with that too. Let that go. Let just
mhm,
something has to be compromised actually, and to be comfortable
mhm.
with that, and to think this is going to be okay because I want this to be brilliant, and make those decisions. I'm really aware of your time, but I just want to ask you a couple more things about the book.
Sure.
Another thing that came up for me as I was reading it, and this is partly to do with the existential thing, but also just time shifts. You talked about aging, and I was thinking about grief, and you talk about
Mm,
death, and the perception of
mm,
time changing as we get older. Um, I know when I have conversations with my mom, all the time she talks about how fast time's gone, how fast time's going. I
mm,
mean, and I think time goes quick, is going quickly,
yeah.
but she's 81 almost, and she has
Mm,
Parkinson's, so she's got lots of things going on.
mhm,
But when we talk, it's so much around the speed of life, and the fact it's gone so
mhm,
quickly. And I think because I've been in this particularly up close and personal with aging stage with her, I
mhm,
feel like I am really having a moment around time that perhaps some of my
mhm.
friends my age aren't, because their parents are well and they're healthy, and I'm
Right.
facing this, gosh, this, we're Chris, you're a similar age to me. We're about the same age.
Mhm,
So we're at that point in life where we can look back and we can look forward, and there's some things
mhm,
that feel, I've got this to come. What's this going to look like? This speed around time can cause
mm,
people to also feel anxious. And sometimes it then paralyzes them to then do nothing or change, and to change
mhm.
nothing. What are your thoughts around this growing older thing, and how do we do this? How do we do this well? I don't want to just spend my life going, it's going too fast, stop. I want
Right,
to
right.
embrace the fact that life
Yeah.
looks a bit different, and enjoy that.
Well, I think when we speak about the pace of time and how it feels different as we age, and when we say it feels different, mostly we feel it feels faster, right? Like when you're a kid, everything is very slow, and it takes so long to get to the next year and these milestones, of becoming a teenager or graduating or going on to the next thing. It's like so far away, and you look at your parents, you just can't. Your parents are just ancient. You can't imagine they're like from another planet, and then you're as you age, you're like, I'm the same age that my parents were at this. Like, how did that
Yeah, I'm
happen?
the age
How
that
does
they
this
were.
happen?
Exactly. When you see
Yeah,
them in those
right,
photos and you think, oh my goodness, my mom
right,
was 45
right.
then, and that's me.
So right. So ultimately, as we think about the pace of time, our perception of it changing, really what we're talking about is death. We're talking about a life cycle, and so I think thinking about that, being aware of that, can cause us to be anxious and cause us to kind of freeze up, as you said, and just do nothing. Or it can actually be very purposeful, and it can actually help us to live better. And I say in the book, it gives us this built-in excuse for anything that we don't want to
Yeah.
do. Once you start understanding like there are things I have to do, but I don't really want to do these things. If you just remember like I'm going to die one day, it kind of helps you. I don't want to take this call. I don't want to go on this meeting. Well, what if I didn't? Would it? What's the worst that could
Mm.
happen? Like maybe I can
I don't wanna
actually
go to
just
this
do.
party. I'm gonna die one because I'm
Sure,
gonna die one day.
exactly.
I thought that was really
Right.
funny.
Yeah, it's funny. I had these conversations with my editor about this whole section, because it's like people are asking you to do things. Will you drop everything and do this thing for me? Like my emergency is your problem, and your response is like, I would love to, but I only have a limited number of days to live. If I had unlimited number of days, then I would do that for you, but I can't. And she was like, my editor was like, do you really want to encourage people, to say that? And I was like, I kind of do, like in their own way, obviously. And it's meant to be like a metaphor, but like, once you start thinking about death and having a personalized understanding of it as opposed to an intellectual understanding of it, then it really can help you live better. It can actually relieve some of that pressure, and it can free up a lot of space. And once you're like, okay, time is limited, therefore, what do I
What
do
do
with
I do
that?
with it? Mm.
It can be actually very, very freeing
If
ultimately.
my 16-year-old hears this, though, the problem's going to be when I say my youngest boy's 16, and we're constantly
Mm,
discussing the fact that he has a brilliant brain and he's fast brain and
mm,
he's wonderful, but he manages to have a room that is a tip about 30 minutes after it's been tidied. I don't know how he does it. And
yeah, sure.
he'd say it's not a tip and I'm being ridiculous. But if he hears this bit, he's just going to, when I next say, can you please put your clothes
Mm,
away? He's going to say, well,
mm.
I'm going to die one day. And no, it's going to be used
Well,
against me for all the things.
I know. So then these are consequences that he has to deal with and you have to deal with. But, I guess I say that the consequences are pretty
They
minor
are,
or,
they
or
are.
mild,
I'm learning, I'm trying to relax about it. I'll say, "Well, can I just put them away for you, please, so I don't have to look at
Mm,
it?"
mhm.
He can have that mess in his own home, hey? In a few years' time, he
Yeah.
can have that chaos.
Sure.
That
Right.
is his own
Exactly.
joy.
Well, this is my home.
Yes.
This is, yeah, different
Yeah,
rules. Mhm,
exactly, and you can
mhm,
think about how this looks another day.
mhm,
Another thing that I really loved, and actually I'd read this idea, I think it was from you had it in a blog and you brought it into the book, the reverse bucket list. I
mm,
loved that, and I actually thought about that and did it myself and went through things. And I
mhm,
think it's such the reverse bucket list. If you could explain it to better than I
mhm,
will, I'd love you to. But going through that process made me realize there's so many things in my life that
mhm,
there's so many things I'd love
mhm,
to still see. Don't get me wrong, but that 21-year-old me would be delighted to have been able to say has
mhm,
happened. And it is so easy with the pressure of time and the urgency of life to just not stop and go, gosh, I
mhm,
did that. That happened. We had that wonderful experience. We did this. Whatever it might be. They don't even have to be huge things, but things that have occurred. And do you want
mhm.
to just explain what the reverse bucket list is for people?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, most people are familiar with a bucket list. It's like a list of my goals or things I want to do. And one day, I want to go to Bali or I want to bungee jump or learn a language and so on. And so that's fine. But the reverse bucket list is like looking back and what are some of the things I've actually done? What have I achieved or accomplished that I am proud of? What are things that I might have had on a bucket list at one point if I had one. Um, and you're just kind of making a list. And when you do that, most people find themselves remembering things that they had completely forgotten about. They're like, oh, I totally forgot that I did this thing. And it was pretty cool or unusual or unique. And I remember feeling really proud of that. And I think it's so helpful because, like I said, I tend to be future minded and I'm always thinking about what is to come. So it's a way to kind of force yourself to be like, oh, actually, like a lot has already happened. And ultimately we want to live more in the present. So I think thinking about the past will help us to do that. And you just kind of feel this sense of pride, and maybe helps you feel less, anxious or less bothered about
Yeah, it's
what's going on
good.
right now.
There isn't a reverse bucket list in my book, but one of the things I do get people to do as part of a planning process is to just reflect on just the last 3 months and to
Mm,
think about all the things in the last 3 months, whether that's I painted the kitchen wall or I
mhm,
cleaned out a kitchen, all the things that you've been doing, because we, again, underestimate what we've actually done, which you and I
mhm,
both talk about in our book. You say we overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can do in a year. And anyone who knows me knows that I say that
mhm.
to myself regularly as part of a reminder of why my days feel too
Yeah,
stacked, but also
yeah.
to help people think you really can move your life on in a year. And that could be a really good place for us to kind of round our conversation up. If
Mhm,
somebody's listening to this and they're feeling like they're running out of time and they're thinking about, well, I'm going to do this tomorrow and this. Actually, how do we help people? I'd love your wisdom in the light of what I've just said, to help people think, actually, a year from now, your life could look quite different. You really could make some
mhm.
shift, but that's going to take some time over those
Sure.
days to get there, rather than thinking, I'm
Mhm.
going to jack it all in tomorrow and I'm going to,
Right,
right,
right.
the new daily routine, get up at 5, do this, do this, do this, and then you just fail
Mhm,
and fall apart. Uh, if they think about a year from now, they could
mhm,
start to see their life with a bit more peace around time. I was going to say control, and that's the wrong word. A peace around the way they deal
mhm,
with time, and a shift in the way their life looks. And yeah, what would you want to say to somebody who's maybe in that space right now and thinking, I would like life to look a
Hmm.
bit different?
I would say the first thing is they're in a good space, because someone who listens or watches this conversation, they're already kind of self-identifying. They're already in this very small minority, of people who are like, oh, I do want to learn and improve, and
Mm,
I do want to do everything I can, not just to imagine a better life for myself, but to take practical steps, towards that. So most people don't read books like Time Anxiety or The Purpose Pursuit. It's like you already kind of like self-identified in that group, and that's great. So you're probably willing to ask yourself like some difficult questions, or to try different things. And I guess, probably the one thing I would like leave them with is like, if you're, worried about time, like, first of all, this is a universal concern, like time is ultimately limited. The wrong approach is to try to manage it somehow, because it's a resource that exists and goes on with or without us. Um, but if you're worried about time running out, like, if you're listening right now, if you're watching right now, there is still time. Like, there is time to make a big change. And so, just like Hannah said, like, imagine a year from now, what could that look like? There is so much that could be different
mm.
in your life, and you're already there.
That's so good, and what a good thing to remind people that, yes, people I actually often say that to people, the fact you're asking these questions means you're
Hmm.
already, on, in
Hmm.
the right space. Chris,
Hmm.
before we close, I just want to just massively say a huge thank you for your time. I know you've got a lot on, and, you've let a stranger reach out, a fan of many years, and actually have this
Well,
conversation with you. And going back to what people have said, I would never have thought a few years ago that I'd ever be having a conversation with you. So thank you for giving your time. If you're
oh, the
listening,
pleasure is mine. Thank you
oh,
for saying that. But I'm now a fan of yours, so
thank
I'm
you.
excited about your
Thank
book.
you.
Thank you.
Well, you'll have an actual copy to have in your hands. I know you've
Great.
read it, but have it in your hands when it comes out.
Hmm.
Time Anxiety is out in all good bookshops.
Hmm.
The Illusion of
Hmm.
Urgency and a Better Way to Live. And just to say, one thing that was in there that I've already working hard on is allowing that 10 to 15 minutes between things. I am a
Hmm.
horror, Chris, at being that person. Of
Uh-huh.
the train doors are about to close, and I'm so
Yes,
actually really
right,
proud of
right.
myself for that. The fact I think, oh, I'm so efficient. I've got here just in time. I
Um,
had a speaking engagement yesterday and I built in that
mm,
extra time and I walked in and thought,
mm.
I feel so smug. I've got all this
Doesn't it
stuff.
feel
It's so
better?
good. I've got my
It feels
Kindle. I can,
relieving.
yeah, the stress levels were lower and I thought, actually, I don't have to live with this sense of urgency to get me to do things.
Mhm.
So
That's
thank you
great.
for that wisdom and thank you for taking the time to share it with everybody.
Of course.
Um,
Thank you so much,
all the
Anna.
very best with the rest of the book tour. We will put all the links and the ways people can
Okay,
find your stuff in the show notes and in my blog. Thank you so much, Chris,
amazing.
and I hope to speak to you again in the future. Come and see us when you're next in the UK.